You know that feeling when, as a crafter, you try and buy anything, and that little voice inside your head goes, "You could make this." Welcome back, everyone. Today I will be doing something I never done before. Menswear. Although strictly speaking, I think this garment could be worn by anyone. So I will be making a costume for a man, which I also never done before. But let's start at the beginning. I was looking around the internet for a warmer Faire compatible layer for my boyfriend, and I came across this design a lot. It's somewhere between a historical doublet and a Gambeson, and it's a very modern fantasy kind of thing that you can see in a lot of shows. And although it's not at all historically accurate, I don't mind it that much. So I was gonna buy it, until that little voice inside my head went, "You could make this." And even better, as a serious fabric hoarder, I think I could make this without buying a single thing. Because I think I already have everything I could need. I already have black fabric, padding, buckles, trims, whatever else I would need. The time for stash busting is here. So let's get going. So here are my plans. I'm gonna make it slightly longer, like a Gambeson, and also padded, but it's not gonna be as padded as a historically accurate Gambeson would be. It's more just for the warmth of it. But I'm going to keep the shoulder details from the doublet because it's just very flattering. It makes your shoulders look a lot wider than they are. The sleeves will be removable and it will close with buckles in the front for adjustability. So you can have as many extra warm layers underneath it as you want. The pattern itself shouldn't be too hard as it's not super form-fitting. Luckily my boyfriend has this old vest that I could use as a base for my first mock-up, which actually turned out nearly perfect. I just have to add some extra to the middle opening so it can slightly overlap and make the sleeves wider and a bit longer. Because I will pad the piece, I also have a chance to play around with the pattern of the stitching that will hold the layers together. While researching the matter, I came across this accident piece that I found really intriguing because I think this sunburst hourglass pattern could be really flattering, optically widening the upper body and slimming the waist. I could very easily imagine it for any knightly strong character. I didn't have enough of one type of black fabric to cut both the lining and the fashion side from it, so I used this cool textured one for the outside because I just really like how more handmade it looks, and a thicker cotton for the inside for some more structural stability. Transferring all the stitch lines to the fabric took a while, but I'm really glad I took the time to figure them out on paper first because it made the process so much easier later. I cut some iron-on interfacing for the collar and the shoulder pieces, and I also cut the back and the front pieces again from this nice coat padding that I got from my grandma's stash. With all the pieces cut, it's time to line them up and stitch them all together following the chalk lines. And yes, this took about 2 days to finish, but look at that! I think they turned out great. Now we just need to assemble them. I wanted to bind the edges in a bit of a contrasting fabric, So I had the brilliant idea of using a satin ribbon from my stash. To be honest, it turned out looking great, but in hindsight, I wouldn't recommend it, as the satin keeps getting caught on stuff, and I don't think it will last very long. So if you like the look of it, I would recommend just buying some satin bias tape instead. Anyway, I'm ironing it in half, so you can stitch it on in one go. When I get to the corner, I'm stitching an arrow, like here, with right sides of the ribbon facing each other. That way, when I turn it out, it will make a nice angle, so I can keep top stitching it down. Honestly, this project came together quite easily, so I'd say binding these corners are probably the trickiest part in the whole process. So if you're a beginner, I think you can definitely make this. Maybe just use some store-bought bias tape and sew it down the usual way, or even just by hand, and you'll be fine. I ironed the interfacing into the sleeve caps and the collar. Then I stitched them right sides together, clipped the seams and the corners, and flipped it inside out. After a thorough press, the collar is ready to be attached to the neckline, but only sewing the fashion fabric side on. This way I can flip the lower edge of the lining piece back, encasing the raw edges of the neckline inside the collar. At the last minute, I also added some padding to the shoulder pieces. I attached the lining, padding and the fashion fabric by sewing around the seam allowance. Then I finished the outer edge with the satin ribbon. I attached them to the arm side by sewing exactly on top of the top stitching line of the ribbon. From the inside, I finished it by felling down the edges. For the buckle straps, I used some leather scraps. Before sewing them on, I rounded and burnished the edges and put a decorative inline. I put the buckles on, but I didn't punch the holes until they were sewn in place, because I wanted to perfectly align it while worn. And with that, the west part of this Doublet Gambeson hybrid Doubletison, I guess, is done. Now onto the sleeves. These are made from the same lining padding fashion fabric sandwich and held together by parallel stitching lines. On the sleeve ends, I covered the raw edges by using the same satin ribbon trick as on the main body, but on the top I used the bias tape because that works a whole lot better for those curved edges. Then I closed up the sleeves and serged that seam. I also basted it down to one side by hand to make that seam flat and more comfortable to wear. Otherwise, that's a very bulky seam that might bother your elbows when you bend your hands. I want to make these sleeves removable. This way it can be used both as a warm coat in the winter and a vest in the warmer weather. To see how a laced-in sleeve can be done properly, I looked up some historical examples. And by far, my favorite was this men's doublet from the Janet Arnold Patterns of Fashion tree. And it seems all you need for this to make it work is some eyelets on the sleeve caps, and a rectangle of fabric with lacing holes in it. So I made this rectangle of fabric by just double folding the stronger lining cotton and put loads of lacing holes in it. This I had to sew in by hand, so it wouldn't be visible from the outside. But I made sure to use tiny and dense stitches to make it as strong as I can, and I sewed down all the edges, some even twice. To finish the insides, I took a couple of evenings in front of the telly to fill down all the edges. This doesn't just make it more clean and professional looking, it also makes the seams more durable. And in the long run, you will be glad that you did it.